Now, Democrats in the US House of Representatives have released images taken on the island owned by the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The footage, filmed back in 2020, comes to light as the Trump administration is under pressure to release all the Epstein files kept by the US Justice Department. Multiple survivors allege they were trafficked and sexually abused on the island known as Little St. James in the US Virgin Islands. Now, to get some analysis, I'm joined now by Scott Lucas, Professor of American Studies at University College Dublin. Good to see you again. Scott, can I ask, what's your immediate reaction when you see this footage of Epstein's island, his palatial home and lavish bedrooms?
Well, I mean, there's a personal reaction, which is as if you match this up to what we know about the pedophilia of Jeffrey Epstein and of many men who were in his network. You know, it shows the location of the crimes. It shows the locations of the horrors, and it reminds me, at least, you know, of the victims that suffered there. If you want to take it to an analytic level, the footage doesn't add any further information as such, you know, regarding Epstein's crimes, regarding Epstein's connections. It simply, I think, illustrates the information that we already have in terms of why it has come out now through the House Democrats. I think it is to get the Epstein story back to the top of the news cycle, to make sure that the visibility is not lost, because we have this December 19th deadline for the Justice Department to complete its review of the Epstein files, the criminal files, and to finally release them after months of stonewalling by the Trump administration. And this footage, again, just by highlighting the case, says don't let the Justice Department and Donald Trump try to wriggle out of that deadline.
OK, so the timing of this, the release of these pictures and videos, is essentially to keep this story front in mind and to make sure people don't forget about it.
Yeah, the leading Democrat, Robert Garcia, was actually quite open about this. It's not like this was like, you know, a sort of an underhanded way to try to put the story out there. Garcia said we need to keep the spotlight on this case because, you know, beyond the political dimensions, the seriousness of it. You know, again, I'll remind you, a few weeks ago, just before the vote by the House, which finally overcame the resistance of the Trump camp to releasing the files, you know, you had dozens of victims of Epstein who were there outside the Capitol saying, this is what we went through. This is how we suffered. And I think, you know, given the bravery of those girls, now women, to speak out after all they suffered, justice and accountability need to be done. And this was just, you know, one way to get the news agencies to say, look, do your job here. Make sure that in a responsible way, not a politicized way, but in a responsible way, that this story is not swept aside. And again, that a Justice Department, which has been politicized by Donald Trump, they effectively work for Donald Trump, that they don't defy Congress, they don't defy their public duty and try to avoid releasing the files.
Just with a little bit of background, how do you think President Trump is handling the pressure to release the complete files?
Not well. I mean, and I could say not well from a tactical point of view, in that, you know, the mistake, and I'm going to sound a bit cynical here, the mistake was for Trump, through his Attorney General Pam Bondi, to effectively promise the files to his supporters back in February and then go back on that promise. It meant that many of his supporters feel like they've been betrayed, they're alienated. But in a wider sense, it portrayed the image of a president who was running from what may be the truth, not only in terms of what it might say about him, but what it might say about others with whom he is associated. And in a more specific way, I think he's not handled it very well, as in many cases, because of his ranting, because of his diversions, because of, quite frankly, his lies. And at the end of the day, I think the most telling thing is that when we had the initial Epstein emails, not the Epstein files, but the Epstein emails that were released a few weeks ago, that fundamental lie was exposed, that, you know, he never was in Jeffrey Epstein's apartments. He was never there alongside the victims, when quite clearly one of the emails showed that he was in on the premises of where these crimes occurred with one of the victims there, even if he himself was not involved in any of the criminal activity.
US political analyst and Professor Scott Lucas, thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you.